The eternal question, the one that every single human being who has ever lived has had to grapple with. Should I quit my loathsome normie job to draw goblins on the internet for riches and glory? Anyone who has invested time into art while working a full-time job has thought about it. I'll build up some money, quit my job, create an unexplainable gap in my employment history, and use that time to go all in on art and try to make something of it. Is this a good idea? I thought I should throw some thoughts out there on this topic because it's a perennial problem. Every wave of students that I have has a few people who are out on this particular ledge. And there's some key points I see people don't consider about it that I think are very important. Let me start by saying, I'm just some guy on the internet. Yeah, I do art for a living, but I don't know your life. You really shouldn't base your decision on what I or anyone else online says. But that said, I'm a guy on the internet who makes his living talking about art and teaching art and doing workshops. It doesn't benefit me to throw cold water on people's artistic ambitions. Business-wise, I should just be hyping you up to quit your job and saying, hey, buy a course on your way out. So, if I'm urging caution against my own interests, I hope you'll take seriously that there's something to think about here. The first thing we need to ask is, exactly why are you thinking of quitting your job? We obviously know it's because you want to make art instead, sure. But why right now? What makes it feel so urgent right now? For a lot of people, it's because their regular job is driving them crazy. And that's really confusing, the situation. We need to ask, is this about your job or is this about art? Because it needs to be about the art. Your job drives you crazy. So you think about and imagine quitting and doing art. When you think of that, you get a romantic rush of emotions. But here's a thought experiment. Try swapping in other things. If you think my job drives me crazy, so I want to quit and travel the world, or I want a job where I'm outdoors working with my hands instead, and those thoughts give you a similar rush of emotions, that might mean that this is more about getting away from the job that you hate rather than a realistic assessment of what you want to do with art and what might be possible to accomplish in a given period of time. And that really is a problem because that hate that you feel for your job is likely contributing to the current energy of your art practice. Tell me if this sounds familiar. When you're at work, all you can think about is art. And you daydream your whole shift, imagining all of these pieces that you're going to make, and you have eurekas about how you're supposed to do art and how you're going to handle the pieces, and you just sit there frothing at the mouth. You're a dog barking at the end of its leash. You can't wait to get home and draw. And then you actually get home, and you just can't do it. Instead, you say, damn, I'm just too tired from work to draw. This, of course, makes you resent your job more, so you go into work tomorrow a little more hateful than today. And so your art fantasies become more intense, and the letdown is more intense when you get home, and the vicious cycle spirals ever downward. You see, you're not really too tired when you get home. I hate to tell you this, but moving your fingers is actually not that physically taxing. What's really going on here is that you have made art an escapist fantasy while you're at work. It's so delicious. Everything about art is easier in your head, and it's certainly easier or more exciting than whatever you need to do at work. When you get home, it can no longer serve this escapist purpose. It instead becomes the real work of making art. And if you haven't built the groove of that real work, it's always going to be harder than playing video games or making jerk chicken. Your favorite. So here's the rub. When you finally quit your job, It's going to be the energy of that nighttime crash all the time. Now there is no job giving you spiteful fuel for the art fire, and art can no longer be escapism. It's going to be just the work that you do every day, and if you've conditioned yourself to need an escape from work, that's not just going to go away. You've habituated it. Something other than art will have to fill that void. Don't worry, I'm sure it'll be something wholesome, like exercise. To avoid that, you need good, holistic motivations for making artwork to already be in place. If your number one motivator for working on art is escaping the perceived trap of your life, you're going to faceplant when art is your life. And for most people, I think it's better and easier to work on building these good motivations while you've still got your job. If they're solid beforehand, while you're still working, you've got a better chance of actually being productive when you quit your job. You may think that if you work 8-hour shifts at your normal job, you're going to just slot art right into that time and spend 8 hours a day making art. But that's actually pretty unlikely. There's the occasional artist who can do that. They have the right temperament, the right plan, the right life experience, but they're the exception, not the rule. For most people, you're gonna run on adrenaline for a month or two, and then the shine is going to wear off. Then you'll enter a very hard period where you're going to find you languish for most of the day, squeezing art into a guilty little hour right at the end of the day. This guilt will naturally become a new fixation, and you'll lose more time watching YouTube videos about how to fix procrastination, or how you need to actualize a Jungian archetype, or researching fungal supplements for optimal neuroplasticity, yada, 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 yada. These are all distractions. Distractions. Our ancestors did art in caves, malnourished, dying from a dental infection, and chased by tigers. No life hacks are necessary. You just need to readjust your expectations to be realistic instead of stupid. Most people are going to need to be flexible about what their new life as an artist looks like. 8 hours of focused, creative, deep work per day is probably out of reach for most people. But 2 hours of hiking while contemplating art and life, and then 2 hours of reading things that stir the imagination, and then 3 or 4 hours of drawing is probably doable. A sustainable art practice comes from peace, joy, and genuine curiosity. Guilt and stress will, of course, get in the way of building these peaceful moments and aspects into your practice, but they're just part of the work of being an artist. Deep down, you already know that. If being an artist was like every other dreary job, no one would want it in the first place. This perfectly tracks with the historical norm of great artists being from cushy backgrounds with families and inheritances supporting them. The gentleman artists and scholars of the past had the luxury of time to do a couple hours of work a day and then let slaves and servants handle the house while they practiced dressage, wrote their pen pals, and walked around in the woods, or whatever rich people get up to. I don't know. Stuff with horses, mostly, I think. In our current culture, we are conditioned to think of someone from that kind of background as inherently soulless, a privileged scion with an appanage who God would never gift with genuine artistic talent on top of their secular seigneury. But it actually makes sense that it is these people who have historically been more likely to reach the heights of artistic ability, because they have the relaxed mental stance needed to engage in an extended practice that requires slow, deliberate, peaceful loving, like drawing. So you really should ask yourself, is the money anxiety a worthy trade-off? This is the big deal, probably the most important stuff I'll bring up in this video. Might it not be better to be your own patron in a sense. Honestly, is it better to do 2 hours of art a day before work, where you're relaxed and not worried about how you're going to feed yourself, or to do 8 hours of art a day where you're panicked the whole time because you've never made a living wage off of your art and you don't actually even know if it's possible, and your last paycheck is 8 months in the rear view mirror? I know this may seem like an unfair comparison when your job truly sucks. But if you haven't tried it before, I promise you, you don't quite understand the angst that can come along with trying to monetize the secret singing bird that lives in your chest. Here's another part of the money anxiety that you may not have considered. You're probably not used to not getting paid for your hard work. You may hate your job, but it's comforting to know that every hour that you sit there hating it, you're still getting paid. No matter what you do, there will be days where you hate making art. How are you going to feel about sitting there and doing it anyway for no reasonable promise of reward? Can you handle that? Will you instead just not sit and work that day? Because in the quit my job to make an art career story arc, that's going to be something that needs to get resolved. That's going to be tricky. It is extremely psychically taxing to spend 6 months, a year, 2 years working hard on something every day, and you don't get paid for any of those hours. And there is only the vaguest hope of a reward floating at the finish line, if you can manage to actually finish the project, that is. You're not even going to school, so you don't have the identity of student, you know? You're nothing, working on stuff that you can't explain to anyone in your life. That is so hugely different than how most people are used to making their living. Even if you wanted to be a doctor, at least you get to say, oh, you're studying for the entrance exams. You're trying to get into med school. This all gives you a sort of pre-packaged identity that people understand. Going hermit mode on being an artist does not. To survive that mental onslaught, you need to be very solid in yourself. You have to not need an identity for others to know you by. You have to be a bit of a sigma. And you need to be okay with toiling for possibly nothing. It will challenge you and force you to face down the nature of existence and culture and social hierarchies. That's one of the worst parts. If you're not ready, this could really distort your relationships and make you sunder ties that you otherwise would have kept. You're going to pay a social price for going down this road on your own. You might infuriate people who are responsible for you, like your parents. And God help you if you have people that you're responsible for, like a partner or kids. They're in for a wild ride, and you better be Marcus fucking Aurelius if you're going to subject them to that. You will also have to watch as friends and family shoot past you on all traditional metrics of life progress. You'll watch people doing much easier things with their lives get rewarded far beyond what you can reasonably hope for. Their success will attract more rewards, more opportunities, more friends, and more freedom. And they won't give you any points for doing something soulful with your life because they probably don't care about art in the first place. You see the benefits to living as an artist. They won't. And there's probably nothing you can do to change that. The problem here is that most artists don't have the spiritual and mental maturity to simply wish these friends, and let's be honest, enemies, they don't have the maturity to just wish them well as they rocket past them. Since there's nothing the artist can do about it, short of
cutting their brake lines,
they become misanthropic and self-isolate. And it won't be long before you have no friends or connections because you reflexively interpret everyone's success as a criticism of your own perceived failures. Does that sound like a healthy place to make art from to you? Maybe. Maybe for a few. For the very few. But not for most. It's not going to be for most. And now here's the kicker. After surviving all of that, after threading all of those needles, if you can pull it off and get a solo career going, being a solo artist, whether a fine artist or a freelancer, is brutal on your finances. More brutal than you're imagining, most likely. Working full-time employed for a company eases this, for sure. But not everybody wants that in this day and age. So I'm not talking to you all that want a staff position at a company. I'm looking at the people who want to do their own thing. Think of how much you need to survive at the level you want. Actually, better than think, audit your finances and find out how much money you actually use to live your current lifestyle. And then how much money you hope to have in the future to live a life that isn't miserable. Minimum miserable life. What is it? 60K a year? 100K? Whatever it is, double it. That's how much money you have to make off of art to live the minimum life you want. Because, at least in the US, that's how much you'll pay in taxes as a solo artist. 50% of your income. And don't go thinking, not if you're smart. If you're smart, you can find loopholes. Those loopholes are for businesses with huge amounts of overhead and employees and expenses. You have no overhead. You are going to buy a $2,000 MacBook Pro once, and then you're going to write off a tiny home office, and that's it. You are going to pay half your income in taxes. And if you've never worked for yourself before, you probably have no real idea how much your employer is helping you out behind the scenes. For example, in the US, did you know that your employer pays half of your Social Security and Medicare tax obligations? Of course you don't, because you're an artist, so every time you see numbers, you throw up. When you work for yourself, you have to pay the full load of those taxes on your own. You don't just cover your 6.2% Social Security tax, you have to cover what would have been your employer's contribution, the other 6.2% as well. So now you've got a 12.4% Social Security tax instead of the 6.2 you're used to. And the same goes for your Medicare taxes. That's another 3% there. Maybe you already knew this, but have you ever done the math on it? What it's gonna feel like to take on that 15% tax? You better hope you don't live in a place like New York City, where there's another 4% unincorporated business tax added on top of everything. So your tax burden as a freelance solo artist is worse than if you work for someone else. Harder life, bigger burden. Oh, and let's not forget, no benefits. You gotta pay for all of your own medical and dental insurance with no subsidizing by your employer. And you're not gonna get any matching benefits from them on your retirement contributions. No unemployment insurance, no disability insurance, no paid family leave. You may think all of that stuff doesn't matter, but it's gonna matter when life comes calling and you see all of your friends taking advantage of all these programs and you are a shoestring away from disaster. And if you're a fine artist working with a gallery, ooh, boy. Let's not forget that the galleries take half of what you sell. Even if you're quite established, the industry norm is half. So let's say you made a little sale. Let's say you sell a painting for $100,000. Gallery takes half, 50K, thank you. That means you made 50,000, and half of that is going to taxes. So you keep $25,000 off of a $100,000 painting. Are you ready to sell $200,000 paintings a year to make $50,000 a year? When's the last time you saw a $100,000 painting made by a living artist. You're not avoiding those taxes, by the way. You think the gallery can just not report the sale? Please, naive. So I ask you again, after hearing the brutal facts of these numbers, what sounds better? Try to sell 200K paintings a year with no safety net, or have a safety net and discover if you can sell a painting at all? Okay. This can all come off rather dour and like I'm not holding frames, Steven. Why aren't you just teaching people how to moisturize and manifest? Don't you worry all this negative talk is lowering the vibrational frequency of your viewers and is going to result in less artists in the world? Honestly, no, because I know I'm talking to an audience of artists. So no matter what I say, you're all just going to do what your heart is telling you in the end. Everything that I've said is from the realm of reason, but artists are creatures of emotion. You're gonna go with the good feelsies and the manic energy no matter what I say. I've known enough artists in my life to be confident in that. Following this way of thinking though, let's look at the other side. When is it a good idea to quit your job and dive into art? First green light is when it's truly about wanting to go toward the art and not about running from your job. The luckiest situation to be in is to actually like or even love your current job. If you really like your job, but still find the pull from art is so intense that you're compelled to leave it anyway, that's a good sign. That way you know this isn't about hating your current job, and so it's more likely that if you leave it, you're going to smoothly transition into working on your own stuff because the energy is for art and not against work. The next green light is if you've tested how it feels with gig work and enjoyed it. Of course, not all artists are trying to go into freelance work, so this doesn't apply to them. And I get why they wouldn't want to. Early gigs are often a drag. They're low pay for inexperienced clients, but if you've gotten gig work already and you miraculously found the process exciting or enjoyable, that is a great sign. Maybe you took some small commissions or you did short-term contract work for smaller companies, and you found that communicating with clients was actually pleasant. You enjoyed the feeling of delivering their dreams to them. If you don't get that ick from doing that, or from setting up marketing pages or writing about your services and products, then you might have the business mind and the comfort with self-promotion that makes it so much easier to strike out on your own as an artist. It's a very lucky thing to have, and you should take advantage of it. The final green light, and the one that will probably apply to most of you, is that you're crazy. If you can accept that you're crazy and nuts and unreasonable, and you're okay with sacrificing your life and your comfort and living on the brink of financial ruin so long as you get to draw waifus, then all right. I'm not kidding. I'm actually not kidding. If the risks have been seriously and reasonably assessed, and you haven't made up delusional excuses for why they don't apply to you, and you're not running from some job, probably because you don't have one, and you just know you're gonna do it anyway, because there's nothing else for you in this dark world, then just do it. Artists have always been out on the edges, strange, unlike others, willing to live with less because the rest of life is simply intolerable to them. It's okay to be one of those artists. It's part of our lineage, our history. But if you're going to be one, you have to know what you're sacrificing. You're going to spend a lot of time extremely unstable. Most artists will never experience a year where they make $100,000. And if you do, that's not your salary. That's just what you made one year. Next year, you might make a quarter of that, and you won't quite know why. You're also going to make it a little tricky to relate to others. Your friends and family will probably never quite understand what you're doing. And you're probably not going to be able to keep up with all of those soft timelines that your friends will be working on. Getting married, having kids, getting a house. Everyone cares about those things in different degrees, and everyone has different levels of risk tolerance, but you're a fool if you think you won't spend a few sleepless nights thinking about everything that could have been. If, after all these considerations, you decide to do it anyway, you decide to give your life to art and allow yourself to be dashed against those jagged rocks that lie right under the scintillating surface, then welcome to the other side. You do a great service. The art demon needs its shamans, and it will have them at any cost. Perhaps in this lifetime, you'll be the lucky human sacrifice.